Hi, everyone. So I didn't mean to quiet you down. I'm just going to say we're going to start in 2 minutes. Or we're starting 2 minutes, that's 5 seconds. That's 15 seconds. Thanks. Well, maybe we'll get started. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Yay! That's wonderful. My name is Howard Jang. I'm director here at ArtSpring. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to ArtSpring. It's our 25th anniversary, and this has been a really wonderful year for us at ArtSpring in terms of thinking about the past and the present and the future. I hope some of you were able to take part in our 25th anniversary celebration a few weeks ago. We're still buzzing about it, and it just feels really good to have connected with our community and have our community connected with us in wonderful ways. And, you know, acknowledging that we are on the unceded territories of our Coast Salish people and reflecting upon that and reflecting upon our 25th anniversary, really thinking about the time in which this building was conceived over 25 years ago, and thinking about the land that this building is on and the importance of stewarding that land, and so acknowledging that is something I think has even deeper importance to us here at ArtSpring. You know, when Margaret Day approached me over a year ago now and said she wanted to bring Ian here, and I was absolutely thrilled when I started to learn more and more about the history that you have brought to our island, and the importance that of commitment and to our community. We're honored that we have this opportunity to actually, that you've entrusted us to do this here, and so I am so thrilled that you have done that. We've been open for a little while now, and it's been really beautiful to see the response to this exhibition, particularly from the students that have come. It's been really fabulous to see them all engaging and really be in conversation and have a ton of questions and really kind of reflecting and sitting down and looking, and I have no idea what's going on in their heads, but I'll just say I'm sure it's fabulous, and it's been wonderful for us to experience that. So I thank you all for being here. I've been looking forward to this night ever since it was planned, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome your MC, Murray. Thank you.
Okay, well. It's just so great to see so many people here. This is wonderful. Thank you all for coming. And for those of you who have spent any time immersed in this remarkable show that surrounds us, Ian Thomas needs little introduction. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to spend much time, I really encourage you to do so. It's on until the 26th, I think, 26th of May. So there's still time to really do it justice. And what always floors me is that, as stunning as the show is, it represents like a fraction of the work that Ian has created in his life as an artist, and 40 of those years spent making art here on Salt Spring. So one can only hope that this show is a harbinger of more to come. So we've asked Ian to say a few words about the project that inspired this evening, as you can see on the walls all in front of you. The 36 portraits of poets on the wall here, so how it came into being and what it all meant, what it all means to Ian. So here we go.
Creeping and crawling, as you notice these days. Just pieces of furniture are very useful items.
I agree.
But I've also been told I have to be fast. No more than 5 minutes. So, poetry. Poetry has a long history in my life. I was a young boy living in a seaside town, Brighton, and I went to a boarding school, and there was pocket money, Saturday pocket money. And you'd line up and you'd get, well, first of all it was 1 and 6, and then I think it was 2 and 6, half a crown. As big and heavy as a toonie. And so as soon as I came and got my toonie, I rushed downtown, and in Brighton, at the bottom of Brighton, close to the promenade, there are a series of lanes. And these little lanes are just for pedestrians, and they involved lots and lots of little old second-hand stores. And the ones I was always heading for were the second-hand bookstores. And I loved I loved it all. But really I was a bit of a fake and a bit of a phony about it at the same time. However, I had my 2 and 6, and there was one store that always put their books out open on the open shelves outside that were really very damaged. Hardcover, but very damaged. The gold and the gilt lettering was fading. There were stains. Maybe there was the odd page torn right out. I don't know. I think so, as I remember it. But those were the books I was after, because that was my 2 and 6, which would cover one. And sure enough, I would pass over my 2 and 6, my half a crown, and walk away so happy with a very large old volume of poetry. Keats, Byron, Yeats, all those stalwarts. Well, that was it. But it wasn't it, because really I wasn't much interested in reading them. I was more interested in being boarding school and going home and putting my latest poetry book on the night table in the dormitory and waiting to see if the master, as he went around on his rounds, would stop and notice my latest book of poetry. That's what it was all about. Well, it worked sometimes and it didn't other times. That was where the poetry began for me. But then over time, things slipped away. I emigrated, I had a family, I built with Jacqueline, my wife, a farm, a small farm, which I will mention later with in terms of Brian Brett. But anyway, after that, I remember writing this little bit here. I have now reached the final years of my life and realize that narrative and storytelling has been at the center of much of my work, and I have been choosing the poets that are close to my heart. And by choosing the poems or fragments of poems, I am reflecting my own felt experience and memories of my own life. Within this collection of 36 poets, there are 6 Salt Spring poets, most of whom I have known and listened to over the years, but there are dozens more. I think of them all as ordinary people with ordinary jobs, who during which every now and then a poem begins to percolate in their minds and hearts, and the words begin to fall. And that is where, after my phony beginning, the real love and sense of poetry began. It was here on Salt Spring, and it was here with all these wonderful Salt Spring poets that I discovered. Just right in the library and in the second-hand bookstores, I really went there and I looked and I found, and I sat back in my seat at home and read. And I loved what I read. These people had such a dynamism about them, had such an excitement about them in terms of the way, through their words, they managed to describe their life, and in so doing, inscribe it on my life. I love them, and I love the Salt Spring poets, and I love what they have done for me. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Ian. It's just so touching. And I just wanted to say that just as this evening would not have been possible without Ian's inspired portraits, fusing the written word and visual image, the entire show that surrounds us could not have taken shape without the curatorial ardor and acumen of Margaret Day and Stephanie Den. So I just want to acknowledge all the skill and the energy they put into making this happen. One of the unique aspects of tonight's event is that while singers and even singer-songwriters routinely do cover songs as part of their act, poets rarely, if ever, perform other poets' work. We don't do it. We get some rare chance to perform our own work, never mind somebody else's. So it's really neat that the poets assembled this evening are offering, in addition to a poem of their own, the equivalent of cover songs, bringing their own voices and sense of rhythm, cadence, intonation, their own music to the work of poets that they deeply admire. So we only have time to give you a really small taste of the poets we've chosen to read. And the hope is that between our brief reading and Ian's marvelous portraits, we'll have aroused your appetite and curiosity so that just like Ian, you will seek out more of their work on your own, take it home, settle back, and just read. So we'll have readings from 6 of the poets Ian's portrayed, although 2 of them aren't here, followed by a brief kind of coda to the evening in which we'll invoke the presence of 2 Salt Spring poets who are no longer with us. Sandy will read a poem by Phyllis Webb, and then Ian will bring the evening to a close with a poem by Brian Brett. So our first poet reader is Sandy Johnson. Sandy is the author of The Comfort of Angels, a fictional work, and The Wonderful Naked Man, poetry and line drawings. Her plays have been produced at the Fire Hall Arts Centre in Vancouver, King's Theatre, Annapolis Royal in Nova Scotia, and on Salt Spring Island, where Sandy lives. Sandy's interested in imaginative work that is socially relevant, and I'll let Sandy introduce the poet that she's chosen. Sandy.
Thank you so much, Mary. I have chosen to read from Osip Mandelstam. The great Russian poet Osip Mandelstam was the most earthy of men. His poems moved toward the core of experience, reflecting the roots of words themselves. He composed in his head, often while walking, and later dictated the poems from memory to his wife. His meditations on the horrific existence in Stalinist Russia are affirmation of poetry as life. Mandelstam's harmonic writing startles in its power and beauty. Many of these poems don't have titles, so I'm reading from this selected poems. The shy, speechless sound of a fruit falling from its tree, and around it the silent music of the forest, unbroken. Poison in the bread, the air drunk dry, hard to doctor the wounds. Joseph, sold into Egypt, grieved no more bitterly for home. Bedouins under the stars close their eyes, sitting their horses, and improvised songs out of the troubles of the day. No lack of subject. One lost a quiver in the sand. One bartered away a stallion. The mist of events drifts away. And if the song is sung truly from the whole heart, everything at last vanishes. Nothing is left but space, the stars, the singer. This poem is in honor of the poet Marina Tsveteva. On a sled covered with straw, our own matting scarcely covered us. We rode through wide Moscow, from the Sparrow Hills to a little church we knew well. Children in Uglik play at knucklebones, a smell of bread baking. I'm taken through streets bareheaded into the chapel, 3 lighted candles. Not 3 lights, but 3 meetings, one blessed by God himself. There will be no 4th. Rome is far, and he never loved it. The sled drove along black ruts, people coming back from their walks, the muziks and cross old women restless at the gate. In the raw distance, a night of birds rose. The bound hands went numb. They're bringing the sarvik. The body turns to ice. They set fire to the straw. And this is a poem to another poet, André Belle. The ranges of the Caucasus follow his baton. He tramped the paths of the packed Alps, waving his arms. Looking around him, he rushed as though frightened through the chatter of an endless crowd. He brought across, as only one with the power could have done, a crowd of minds, events, impressions. Rachel looked into the mirror of phenomena, and Leah wore a wreath as she sang. And this is the last Mandelstam poem, Black Earth. Manured, blackened, worked to a fine tilth, combed like a stallion's mane, stroked under the wide air, all the loosened ridges cast up in a single choir, the damp crumbs of my earth and my freedom. In the first days of plowing, it's so black it looks blue. Here the labor without tools begins. 1,000 mounds of rumor plowed open. I see the limits of this have no limits. Yet the earth's a mistake, the back of an axe. Fall at her feet, she won't notice. She pricks up our ears with her rotting flute, freezes them with the woodwinds of her mourning. How good the fat earth feels on the plowshare, how still the step turned up to April. Salutations, black earth, courage, keep the eye wide, be the dark speech of silence, laboring. And I have brought another Van Gogh poem. It's Vincent's Bed. Vincent painted his room, no room for him. He painted his own blue doors, his lonely bed cut and planed, the sheets thin, blankets worn, feathers poked through the ticking of his hard pillows. 2 chairs quietly sit beside the wall. He painted rest, his berry red blanket, the blood of dreams. Drunk and hungry, the sky cracked open in his hands, bits of sky under his fingernails, ultramarine, cobalt blue, stuck in his beard. He told Theo everything, his hair on fire, Pauswali red in his beard. He painted flowers drenched in sun. He couldn't sell. Pinned to his cross, he drew the twisted oak, white clouds banking, the spirit ascending. He plowed darkness, painted wheat fields, ate raw umber. He painted irises, purple rainbows, each one brilliantly alive. Silk gowns, clotted color, wild markings on their tongues. He told Theo everything. If only he could walk with his brother an afternoon in the woods. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Our next poet, Shirley Graham, has published 3 books of poetry. The most recent, Shakespearean Blues, published by Salt Springs Mother Tongue Press, was a finalist for the Fred Cogswell Poetry Award. Shirley.
Yikes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thanks. I'm going to say my own thanks to Margaret, Stephanie, Murray, the people who helped create this event, and especially to Ian for your decades of amazing work, and for being or becoming a careful reader of poetry and bringing that love into your art. It was very hard from your wonderful list of poets to choose, but I chose Dylan Thomas. He probably needs no introduction, but I'll give a little one. He was a Welsh poet, lived 1914 to 1953. He died young from hard, wild living, like a quintessential romantic poet. He was a rock star in his short life, belting his lyrical, syntactically charged poems to large, adoring crowds. That's rare. He was one of my first poetry loves, not for his big persona, but for the dense and deeply creative phrasing, vivid imagery, and impacted music in his work that seemed to me to mirror and evoke the gnarled, moody, and verdant Welsh landscape that he came from. You'll hear that landscape in this first poem, Fern Hill. Now, as I was young and easy under the apple boughs about the lilting house, and happy as the grass was green, the night above the dingle starry, time let me hail and climb golden in the heydays of his eyes. And honored among wagons, I was prince of the apple towns, and once below a time I lordly had the trees and leaves trail with daisies and barley down the rivers of the windfall light. And as I was green and carefree, famous among the barns about the happy yard, and singing as the farm was home, in the sun that is young once only, time let me play and be golden in the mercy of his means. And green and golden I was huntsman and herdsman, The calves sang to my horn, the foxes on the hills barked clear and cold, and the Sabbath rang slowly in the pebbles of the holy streams. All the sun long it was running, it was lovely, the hayfields high as the house, the tunes from the chimneys, it was air and playing, lovely and watery and fire green as grass. And nightly under the simple stars, as I rode to sleep, the owls were bearing the farm away. All the moon long I heard, blessed among stables, the nightjars flying with the ricks, and the horses flashing into the dark. And then to awake, and the farm like a wanderer white with the dew come back, the cock on his shoulder. It was all shining, it was Adam and maiden. The sky gathered again, and the sun grew round that very day. So it must have been after the birth of the simple light, in the first spinning place, the spellbound horses walking warm out of the whinnying green stable onto the fields of praise. And honored among foxes and pheasants by the gay house under the new-made clouds, and happy as the heart was long in the sun born over and over, I ran my heedless ways, my wishes raced through the house high hay, and nothing I cared at my sky-blue trades that time allows in all his tuneful turning, so few and such morning songs before the children green and golden follow him out of grace. Nothing I cared in the lamb-white days that time would take me up to the swallow-thronged loft by the shadow of my hand in the moon that is always rising, nor that riding to sleep I should hear him fly with the high fields and wake to the farm forever fled from the childless land. Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means, time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. Dylan Thomas. And that last line, though I sang in my chains like the sea, reminds me, echoes these lines that Ian chose from the Villanelle. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. He had such passion for life in all its forms. So that was a long poem. I'm just reading one more short one of his, and then the poem that Ian chose of mine. In my craft or sullen art, exercised in the still of night, when only the moon rages and the lovers lie abed with all their griefs in their arms, I labor by singing light, not for ambition or bread, or the strut and trade of charms on the ivory stages, but for the common wages of their most secret heart. Not for the proud man apart from the raging moon I write on the spindrift pages, nor for the towering dead with their nightingales and psalms, but for the lovers, their arms round the griefs of the ages, who pay no praise or wages, nor heed my craft or art. The poet's life, hey? So I'm reading a poem that Ian chose from Shakespearean Blues. It starts with a quote from a Shakespeare play, Blue Heading Out the Door. All the world's a stage, and the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. From As You Like It. My son walks out the front door, bumping shoulders with the shape he will become. And I stand holding the blue jacket he refuses, speaking words that bounce off him like rain, the lump in my throat as big as on his first day of school. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. That was great. It's funny that I hadn't read Dylan Thomas for so long, and the lines just came right back. So our next reader was to have been Diana Hayes, but unfortunately she is unable to be with us tonight. But I'm going to read the introduction because she is certainly with us in spirit. Diana Hayes was born in Toronto and has lived on the east and west coast of Canada. She has 7 published poetry books, most recently Sapphire and the Hollow Bone by Ecstasis Editions. She launched Raven Chapbooks, an indie publisher for small edition poetry chapbooks, in 2019, and she has lived on Salt Springs since 1981. Now, Lola Devendish has very graciously stepped in at the last minute, and she'll be reading Diana's selections for us. Lola has been part of the dance community on Salt Spring for over 40 years. She's a poet, writer of fiction and nonfiction, and her most recently published work is a memoir titled A Dancer's Pilgrimage. So Lola Devendish reading for Diana Hayes.
It's my great pleasure to be here for Diana, and she's wonderful to work with. Love her poetry, and her beautiful choice of poet tonight is Pablo Neruda. And I begin with an epigraph, which is a quote from the poetry of Pablo Neruda, his book, The Poetry of Pablo Neruda, and it is a translation by Stephen White. And I tell you that you should open yourselves to hearing an authentic poet, of the kind whose bodily senses were shaped in a world that is not our own, and that few people are able to perceive. A poet closer to death than to philosophy, closer to pain than to intelligence, closer to blood than to ink. This is a translation by Alistair Reid of Pablo's work, I Will Come Back. Sometime, man or woman, traveler, afterwards, when I am not alive, look here, look for me here, between the stones and the ocean, in the light storming in the foam. Look here, look for me here. For here is where I shall come, saying nothing, no voice, no mouth, pure. Here I shall be again the movement of the water, of its wild heart. Here I shall be both lost and found. Here I shall be perhaps both stone and silence. And this is that same poem in the original Spanish. Yo volveré. Alguna vez, hombre o mujer, viajero, después, cuando no viva, aquí buscadme entre piedra y océano, a la luz procelaria de la espuma. Aquí buscadme, porque aquí volveré sin decir nada, sin voz, sin boca, puro. Aquí volveré a hacer el movimiento del agua de su corazón salvaje. Aquí estaré perdido y encontrado. Aquí seré tal vez piedra y silencio. To the traveler, these stones aren't sad. Within them lives gold. They have the seeds of planets. They have bells in their depths, gloves of iron, marriages of time with the amethysts. On the inside, laughing with rubies, nourishing themselves from lightning. Because of this, traveler, pay attention to the hardships of the road, to mysteries on the walls. I know this at great cost, that all life is not outward, nor all death within, and that the age writes letters with water and stone for no one, so that no one knows, so that no one understands anything. Ode to Enchanted Light. The light under the trees, the light from high heaven, the green arbor light that flashes in the leaf, that falls like fresh white sand. A grasshopper lifts its soaring sounds over the clearness. The world is a full glass of water. And this is one of my favorites, and it was an inspiration for P.K. Page for her poem, The Planet Earth, and it's called Ode to Ironing. Poetry is white. It comes from water swathed in drops. It wrinkles and gathers. This planet's skin has to spread out. The sea's whiteness has to be ironed out, and the hands keep moving. The sacred surfaces get smoothed, and things are done this way. The hands make the world every day. Fire conjoins with steel. Linen, canvas, and cotton arrive from the scuffles in the laundries, and from light a dove is born. Chastity returns out of the foam. And the last poem is one of Diana Hayes' own poems, and it's called Awakening. And she says, I chose this poem as it is an ekphrastic piece based on Ruth Ray's painting of the same title. It was her final piece and was found on her easel before she passed away. Ruth was an American magic realism painter, and she lived from 1919 to 1977. Awakening for Ruth Ray. Where sleep's wild embrace does not prepare you, waiting on the lip of an incoming tide, just shy of flotsam and foam, tiny waves lapping, mirror heartbeat within. Behold the fronds of light, they burn through cloud mandala, lunar or solar. Dali's clock melts away doubt. Beyond the beach your canvas awaits. Coral slippers no longer fit. To the leeward edge a black cat does not startle. Your bed becalmed in Darien's New England dawn. Awakening, then gone. Thank you.
And sad to say, our next scheduled reader also was unable to make it this evening, Mona Fertig. So I'll read her introduction as well. She's okay, she just had to be somewhere else. Mona's new book of poetry, Islander, will be released next month. It's her first book of poetry in 14 years. She started the first and only literary center in Canada when she was 24. In Ian's painting, the photo of her with her t-shirt, On the Road for Poetry, was taken by the Vancouver Sun at the literary storefront. And Stephanie Dens has very kindly offered to read Mona's selections. And Stephanie, as I mentioned, is the co-curator of this exhibit. So Stephanie, thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. The poet that Mona chose is Anne Carson. Anne Carson is a Canadian poet and academician with 18 published books. She is a sought-after lecturer teaching in numerous universities since 1979. She has been a poet in residence at Cornell and Stanford universities, and most recently at Bard College. Carson is trained as a classicist, and she brings her love for ancient Greek and Latin literature to her writing, translating and modernizing it as she fuses ideas and themes from many fields to the classic. In Carson's process, the forms of poetry, essay, prose, criticism, translation, dramatic, dialogue, fiction, and nonfiction are brought together in unique ways. Also, the poem that, she's right here behind this speaker, by the way. It's a great little painting and choice of poem, which I'm going to read. Western Motel by Anne Carson from her book Men in the Off Hours. Pink bedspreads, you say, are not pleasing to you, yet you sit very straight till the pictures are through. 2 suitcases watch you like dogs. You wear your hair parted low on the right. Mountains outside look like beds without night. 2 suitcases watch you like dogs. Now I've got... This is from her book, Short Talks. I will read 3 short poems, maybe another one, but... And there's a longer, she's got fabulous longer poems with the Greek theme, but they're long. So, Kafka liked to have his watch an hour and a half fast. Felice kept setting it right. Nonetheless, for 5 years, they almost married. He made a list of arguments for and against marriage, including inability to bear the assault of his own life, for, and the sight of nightshirts laid out on his parents' beds at 10:30, against. Hemorrhage saved him. When advised not to speak by doctors in the sanatorium, he put glass sentences all over the floor. Felice says one of them had too much nakedness left in her. Short talk on reading. Some fathers hate to read, but love to take the family on trips. Some children hate trips, but love to read. Funny how often these find themselves passengers in the same automobile. I glimpsed the stupendous clear-cut shoulders of the Rockies from between paragraphs of Madame Bovary. Cloud shadows roved languidly across her huge rock throat, traced her fur flanks. Since those days, I do not look at hair on female flesh without thinking, deciduous? Short talk on my task. My task is to carry secret burdens for the world. People watch curiously. Yesterday morning at sunrise, for example, you could have seen me on the breakwall carrying gauze. I also carry untimely ideas and sins in general, or any faulty action that has been lowered together with you into this hour. Trust me, the trotting animal can restore red hearts to red. Yeah. All right. So Mona's piece is just over there next to Shirley, and it's the last stanza of a longer poem, which I'm now going to read. And the poem is called This is Paradise, from the book Unsettled. This is paradise, but land robbed from the Japanese dislodges grave markers, buried rice bowls. They skim through crisp air, smash open on Rainbow Road. Emptied of the past, the earth sings hollow, seedless, grows stones. Some men at Mowat's sweat in their sleep. The crooked old floor in the old store trips everyone. Ganges harbor shakes loose its rubble body, land filled for real estate gold. The town forgets to redress history, denies racism. A cherry tree blooms. This is paradise. But on Sayot land, the thin blue leg bones of the dead impatiently kick midden shells away. It has been too long since the oil-fat Ulakan slid by and you could walk across the backs of the sea ducks and silver herring. Burning his favorite food, the last hungry ghost returns. Eating sweet salmon disables anger. Grief rests, catches his breath. A blue light glows in the wildwood. Kamas, butter clams reopen. This is paradise. But the optimists are tired. The dreamers who drifted here as hippies have grown old. Their children have left for the mainland to seek their fortune, taken the ferry and cell phone. Old activists braid garlic, enter pies at the fall fair. Deer slip through dusk like island widows. Villagers take refuge in singing or solitude. Party at potlucks or lament over change and progress. The pessimists go home early, champion themselves, call 911. This is paradise. But phosphate lakes shimmer from space. Bottled water saves lives. Locals renovate, put in heated tile floors, mortgage like clockwork, practice yoga, love Barb and Heather's bread. Nothing stops growth except satellite TV and depression. After the Saturday market, islanders go home to tall, tangled gardens and lie naked in the sun with a cold beer and dream. Write books. Tuck money under mattresses for winter. Catch crab at Fernwood Dock. Picnic. Their honey bear leaves home. Bed springs. This is paradise. But as the island's shadow deepens, curls hairs, rocks boats, signs, pan, 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 beauty walks the beach barefoot with herons, cradles hope, swims in the phosphorescent sea. Even when the rain clouds darken, she smells the forest, regrowing, salal ripening. Every spring she finds her way back into our lives, down from Mount Maxwell, past the watershed, the quarry, despite red tide, high taxes, misunderstanding. She is twofold, too old, too young, clear as the future, always driving her trusty car to the edge.
Thank you, Stephanie. That really brought it all home. Our next poet is with us, Brian Day. Brian is the author of 5 books of poetry, including the recently published book-length poem, The Making, which is available for purchase on the table at the back there. So, Brian.
Thank you, Murray. My poet is Gerard Manley Hopkins. Gerard Manley Hopkins was a British Jesuit writing in the second half of the 19th century. The founder of the Jesuits, Ignatius of Loyola, advised his followers to find God in all things, and this impulse is visible in Hopkins's poetry, discovering in ordinary things not only beauty, but the flash and the ecstasy of the numinous. Hopkins' poetry is sonically rich, and I jumped at the opportunity to read some of it aloud. I also have had something of a poetic crush on Hopkins since discovering his poetry as an undergraduate. His poems can be somewhat hard to follow, particularly on a first hearing, and I'd invite you just to revel in the sounds and the images as they arrive. I'll start with Moonrise. I awoke in the midsummer, not to call night, in the white and the walk of the morning. The moon dwindled and thinned to the fringe of a fingernail held to the candle, or paring of paradisaical fruit, lovely in waning but lusterless, stepped from the stool, drew back from the barrow of dark Mayanefa the mountain. A cusp still clasped him, a fluke yet fanged him, entangled him, not quit utterly. This was the prized, the desirable sight, unsought, presented so easily, parted me, leaf and leaf, divided me, eyelid and eyelid of slumber. As kingfishers catch fire. As kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame. As tumbled over rim in roundy wells, stones ring. Like each tucked string tells, each hung bell's bow swung finds tongue to fling out broad its name. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same, deals out that being indoors each one dwells, selves, goes itself, myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. I say more. The just man justices, keeps grace, that keeps all his goings graces, acts in God's eye what in God's eye he is, Christ. For Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes not his, to the Father through the features of men's faces. And the next poem is that which figures in one of Ian's paintings, nearby here somewhere. Thank you. And this is Pied Beauty. Glory be to God for dappled things, for skies of couple color as a brinded cow, for rose moles in all stipple upon trout that swim, fresh fire coal, chestnut falls, finch's wings, landscape plotted and pieced, fold, fallow, and plow, and all trades, their gear and tackle and trim, all things counter, original, spare, strange. What is fickle, freckled, who knows how, with swift, slow, sweet, sour, a dazzle, dim. He fathers forth whose beauty is past change. Praise him. The poem of my own that I chose to read is one that, I hope, participates in some of the laudatory stream of Hopkins, particularly in Pied Beauty. This is from my recent book, The Making, which is about the creation and development of the universe. And this piece reflects on the abundance and multiplicity of the process of creation. Profusion. Why is this universe so bent on profusion? Why the uncountable trillions of stars, the furnaces that fashion whole rows of elements, archipelagos of planets instead of just one? Why the curious press to speciation, the blazoning of making as the name of all this? Why is what is so pregnant with excess? The this too and this, the harlequin indulgence. Why through all the reaches and fractals of the known, this faint disequilibrium inciting invention, this strange inclination to meet and indulge every craving for bizarreness and beauty? How has such plenitude come to be? If by chance, then some species of chance overflowing with the generous. Some prince, born once in 1,000 generations, a hero replete with luck and summonable riches. In lieu of some placid order, extravagance, this ignition velocity crackling with light, this whirling Catherine wheel of becoming, this profligate craving for the untasted, this probing of every cranny of the possible, this desire for the eruption, fluorescence, of the novel, this desire to be numbered with the number of stars. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. This is just great. I'm kind of rediscovering poets I knew years ago and haven't read for way too long. So I'm just going to have to slip briefly into the first person, introduce myself. I've Marie Rees. I've published 2 books of poetry and a chapbook, but my work is most immediately accessible, though I don't know for how long, in the front window of Salt Springs Laundromat and Soap Exchange. So check it out. And I've chosen to read Federico Garcia Lorca. The incandescent Spanish poet and playwright Federico Garcia Lorca was passionately devoted to the forces of what he called duende, a term that is hard, if not impossible, to pin down. The duende, he wrote, loves the edges, the wound, and draws close to places where forms fuse in a yearning beyond visible expression. There are no maps nor disciplines to help us find the duende, he wrote. We only know that he burns the blood like a poultice of broken glass, that he exhausts, that he rejects all the sweet geometry we have learned. Intelligence, he explained, is often the enemy of poetry because it limits too much and it elevates the poet to a sharp-edged throne where he forgets that ants could eat him or a great arsenic lobster could fall suddenly on his head. I'll start with Farewell, the poem that Ian has referenced in his portrait, and then I'll read from Lorca's collection Divan del Tamarit, The poems I've selected are titled ghazals, gacelas in Spanish, after a form originating in Arabic poetry, a form that Lorca doesn't follow in the slightest. Farewell. If I die, leave the balcony open. The little boy is eating oranges. From my balcony, I can see him. The reaper is harvesting the wheat. From my balcony, I can hear him. If I die, leave the balcony open. Now, these are translated by a variety of translators, but most frequently and most, to my taste, the best, W.S. Merwin. Ghazal of Unforeseen Love. No one understood the perfume of the dark magnolia of your womb. No one knew that you martyred a hummingbird of love between your teeth. 1,000 Persian ponies fell asleep in the moonlit plaza of your brow, while through 4 nights I embraced your waist, enemy of the snow. Between plaster and jasmines, your glance was a pale branch of seeds. I sought in my heart to give you the ivory letters that say always, always, always. Garden of my agony, your body elusive always, the blood of your veins in my mouth, your mouth already lightless for my death. Ghazal of the terrible presence. I want the water reft from its bed. I want the wind left without valleys. I want the night left without eyes, and my heart without the flower of gold, and the oxen to speak with great leaves, and the earthworm to perish of shadow, and the teeth of the skull to glisten, and the yellows to overflow the silk. I can see the duel of the wounded night writhing in battle with the moon. I resist the setting of green venom and the broken arches where time suffers. But do not illumine your clear nude like a black cactus open in the reeds. Leave me in an anguish of dark planets, but do not show me your cool waste. Ghazal of desperate love. The night does not wish to come, so that you cannot come, and I cannot go. But I will go, though a scorpion sun should eat my temple. But you will come, with your tongue burned by the salt rain. The day does not wish to come, so that you cannot come and I cannot go, but I will go, yielding to the toads my chewed carnation. But you will come through the muddy sewers of darkness. Neither night nor day wishes to come, so that I may die for you and you die for me. Ghazal of the bitter root. There is a bitter root, and the world has 1,000 terraces. Nor can the smallest hand shatter the door of water. Where are you going? Where? Oh, where? The sky has 1,000 windows, battle of livid bees, and there is a bitter root, bitter. The ache in the sole of the foot is the ache inside the face, and it aches in the fresh trunk of night, only just lopped off. Love, my enemy, bite your bitter root. Ghazal of the dark death. I want to sleep the dream of the apples, to withdraw from the tumult of cemeteries. I want to sleep the dream of that child who wanted to cut his heart on the high seas. I don't want to hear again that the dead do not lose their blood, that the putrid mouth goes on asking for water. I don't want to learn of the tortures of the grass, nor of the moon with a serpent's mouth that labors before dawn. I want to sleep a while, a minute, a century. But all must know that I have not died, that there is a stable of gold in my lips, that I am the small friend of the west wind, that I am the immense shadow of my tears. Cover me at dawn with a veil, because dawn will throw fistfuls of ants at me and wet with hard water my shoes, so that the pincers of the scorpion slide. For I want to sleep the dream of the apples, to learn a lament that will cleanse me of the earth, for I want to live with that dark child who wanted to cut his heart on the high seas. And the last is a Qasida of the lament. I have shut my balcony because I do not want to hear the weeping, but from behind the gray walls, nothing else is heard but the weeping. There are very few angels that sing. There are very few dogs that bark. 1,000 violins fit into the palm of my hand. But the weeping is an immense dog. The weeping is an immense angel. The weeping is an immense violin. The tears muzzle the wind. Nothing else is heard but the weeping. And I'll finish with a poem of my own from Cemetery Compost called City of Tyrants. I was born into a city of tyrants, a meter on every cloud, rationed rain. Persuaded we'd run out of time, we dug our wells a little deeper every day, hung our mirrors with husks of corn, dried in the unemployed bakers' ovens. When sirens rasped at midnight, barbers laid down their razors to pray. When the all clear told for silence, they went back to shaving thick blonde curls that clung to the orphans' necks. No one questioned the thirsty warnings whistling in our ears. It was enough to set the table, tell time by holes in the sky. No one slept. Candles lit from our pillows' embers led our way. The judge with the smallest hands wielded the cruelest gavel. In the market, we turned our backs on widows' trinkets, pried the coal and seeds from peddlers' hands. Thank you. And as I mentioned earlier, Sandy will read a poem by Phyllis Webb, and then Ian will close out the evening with a poem of Brian Brett. So take it away.
This is the poem that Ian chose with his painting of Phyllis. It's a very short poem, but it's so much larger than itself. It really speaks to the mystery in which we are all involved. Sitting by Phyllis Webb. The degree of nothingness is important. To sit emptily in the sun, receiving the fire, that is the way to mend an extraordinary world, sitting perfectly still and only remotely human. Thank you.
Just a little piece of a poem by Brian Brett. I'm sure, as all of you know, Brian has just recently left us, and that's a hole. I did love Brian. I loved the way he was. I loved him in part because he was part of the South End. And I have spent time with him, and I have seen him walk stride up and down Beaver Point Road in his leather vest and broad brimmed hat and large boots, often covered with slime and mud and blood. Well, he also is an inspiration to me because he wrote Trauma Farm. That is his first memoir on living a life, a very rural life, and building a farm and having animals and grass and trees and flowers and his horses and his cows, and always and forever, perched on his shoulder, his parrot, Tuko. It's just a fragment of one of his poems. My first view of the world was from between a woman's legs. It was bright and white and beautiful. Then a stranger slapped me. It's been like that ever since.
Wonderful, wonderful, Ian. A great ending for the evening. So thank you all for coming. There are cookies and refreshments at the back there, and we do have this space for a while still, so enjoy the work, enjoy the artwork, circulate, take in the poets, the poems, and yeah, hang out for a while. And thank you again for all coming.